volcanic eruptions.
It was insane.
Violent debris flows.
If you were in that particular area, there was no survivors. None.
Pyroclastic flows.
They're the ultimate volcanic hazard.
Volcanoes are both mesmerizing and terrifying.
There's a sense of excitement, being close to something so beautiful yet so dangerous.
Yet these deadly planetary eruptions don't only tear apart and forge our world.
It looked like a desert across the ocean.
Their total impact can inject life into a dying part of the planet.
We have life being transported around the world's oceans.
And they could one day help with interplanetary exploration.
They've also attracted the interest of space agencies.
Hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes.
This was the deadliest tornado on record.
The impact can be devastating.
God completely wiped it off the map.
We step inside the disaster.
We were running for our lives.
It hits like a freight train.
And unravel the unexpected and sometimes jaw-dropping total impact.
Believe it or not, some good can come from these monster storms.
Tourists stand along a hillside in Guatemala when the nearby El Fuego volcano erupts, sending lava and plumes of smoke into the air. Volcanoes have maimed and destroyed civilizations since the beginning of recorded history. Yet on this day, everyone pulls out a camera. Like many tourists, this is the main event they've come for, seeing a volcano erupt up close. They have no idea that it's only the opening act to a deadly showstopper. Guatemala is known for its ancient ruins, jungles, and breathtaking volcanic landscape. Every year, over 2 million tourists visit to hike its 37 volcanoes. Situated just outside the beautiful city of Antigua, Guatemala, El Fuego volcano, Spanish for volcano of fire, is famous for being the most active.
I was volunteer English teacher for roughly 3 weeks. Just at the beginning of summer, my second weekend, me and some people in our homestay decided to take a hike up the Acatenango volcano, which its main attraction was the Fuego volcano.
The hike begins with an overnight stay at base camp, where the unpredictable El Fuego looms in the distance.
We stayed up a little late that night, then we started seeing spewing. It was going so high, it was amazing. It just looked so cool. We could feel it for sure. Kind of sounded like a really aggressive thunderstorm. You just felt like someone is like kind of shaking your mattress. It was just an adrenaline rush for the whole night.
Sophia has lived in the area her whole life and never ceases to be captivated by the beauty of El Fuego.
It's always a spectacle, especially at night. We always thought about it as something beautiful that you could enjoy. There's also a sense of excitement to being close to something that's so beautiful yet so dangerous.
One of Sophia's favorite pastimes is photographing the iconic site.
I woke about 5 a.m. and I did what I usually do, go and grab a cup of coffee and go to the garden and watch the volcano. And I thought I can call my friends and we can meet up and go make photos.
Aiden and his new friends begin their morning with a hike up the mountain to view El Fuego and then head back to the city.
It was just kind of one of those fun, challenging experiences, and it was so worth it getting to the top. It's one of those things you never get to experience in your life, seeing the active volcano.
Standing 3,700 meters tall, El Fuego is a stratovolcano.
Stratovolcanoes are built of lava, which is more sticky and doesn't like to flow so far. These pile up around the vent, and they build stratovolcanoes such as Mount Fuji in Japan, or Vesuvius in Italy, or Mount Rainier in the United States.
These tall, steep, cone-shaped stratovolcanoes are considered the most dangerous formations and make up about 60% of the world's volcanoes. Eruptions are extremely difficult to predict, but deep within the volcano, magma can act as a plug. As gases build, so does pressure, until the volcano explodes. It can happen without warning, shooting out superheated gases, ash, lava, and debris. At up to 1,200 degrees Celsius, they can burn and suffocate everything in their paths.
Volcanoes are the mechanism by which the Earth loses heat. Magma is a way of removing the heat from within the Earth and distributing into the Earth's surface, ocean, and atmosphere. Volcanic eruptions are triggered usually by more magma entering the magma chamber under the volcano and pushing out the magma that's already there or mixing with it and making it rise up to the surface.
The rising magma is caused by the shifting of tectonic plates.
The tectonic plates are crunching together, or one is sliding underneath another in destructive plate margins. The Pacific Ring of Fire, and that's a whole zone around the Pacific Ocean where the Pacific plate is being what we call subducted or taken down underneath the surrounding plates that encircle the Pacific.
While larger eruptions of El Fuego have wiped out crops and led to evacuations, they're quite rare. The volcano is a tourism hotspot, with small eruptions every 15 to 20 minutes. Later that morning, Sophia and her friend head out to take pictures.
You couldn't see anything, not even the volcano, so I decided to go back home.
At the base of El Fuego, Antonio is just wrapping up his morning shift at a golf course.
Terminamos de trabajar ese día, 12 menos 10. Ya me dirigí a guardar el carrito en el sótano del hotel. Cuando vi para el volcán, se veía fuerte que venía para abajo. Fui a decirle a mis compañeros de trabajo que salieran a ver el volcán. Y pues decidieron ahí la seguridad que tenía ahí del hotel evacuar.
For locals like Antonio, the active volcano is nothing to panic about, and he heads home for lunch. As Sophia and her friend are driving home, El Fuego rumbles to life.
As we were driving home and going through these communities that are close to the volcano, there were rocks falling from the sky. At one point we stopped and I opened the door and I picked one, and it was almost as big as my hand. That's what I said, we need to get out of here.
Back at his hostel, Aiden sees the ash begin to fall.
The ash pretty much covered almost everything. I'd say it's similar to like some heavy snow.
Near El Fuego, Antonio is just about to have lunch with his family.
Como a eso de las 2:30 que me dijo mi suegra, le dije yo, mire, está fuerte el volcán, y me dijo, primero Dios, ya no pasa nada, ¿verdad? Fue podríamos decir, la última convivencia con mi suegra.
A plume of ash billows 10,000 meters up into the air. It's so large, it's visible from space.
We didn't know it was going to be an unusual eruption because we were always expecting lava. And lava is something that you can you can live with it, you can outrun lava.
While lava has been clocked flowing downhill at up to 60 kilometers an hour, in most cases, it travels at less than 1 kilometer an hour. At 5 times less than average walking speed, it can easily be outpaced. But something much deadlier than lava is suddenly unleashed.
But there was nothing that could let us know that this time, instead of lava, there was going to be pyroclastic flows.
Pyroclastic flows are deadly. Most people consider them to be the ultimate volcanic hazard.
As a massive eruption explodes from El Fuego in Guatemala, Eugenio, a volunteer firefighter, and his colleagues head towards the volcano.
Nosotros fuimos, era ayudar a evacuar las personas que estaban cerca del volcán de Fuego.
But many villagers refuse to leave. To locals, there's nothing terribly unusual about a volcano that's seen daily activity since 2002. But familiarity can be dangerous. The Santa Maria volcano had been dormant for more than 500 years when it suddenly erupted in 1902, killing 6,000 people. It was one of the biggest eruptions of the 20th century, reaching 28 kilometers into the stratosphere. The ash buried villages and spread as far as San Francisco, 4,000 kilometers away. A blast of this magnitude today would be devastating.
Ellos estaban acostumbrados a escuchar al volcán con los retumbos con la erupción del volcán. Entonces ellos decían que eso todo era normal. Para mí que las pobres personas no tuvieron una advertencia antes, pues, lo que eso es lo que iba a pasar.
At the most, many are expecting some lava.
Para nosotros era como que la lava también iba a agarrar su trayectoria en la barranca. Pero prácticamente se llenó allá en la parte de arriba y fue donde se pasó para el lado de nosotros.
As Antonio watches, things take a deadly turn. Instead of dissipating into the atmosphere, the massive plume of smoke and ash above the volcano begins to collapse like an avalanche.
Pyroclastic flows are generated from the explosive cloud above the volcano. The parts that haven't mixed with the atmosphere that are more dense are going to plunge towards the ground and start flowing down the flanks of the volcano.
Traveling at up to 700 kilometers an hour, they're impossible to outrun for any distance.
Íbamos para en toda la carretera cuando se dejó venir eso. Decidí correr, ya era un caos. Entonces les grité yo a los que estaban todavía, corran, métanse a sus casas, protéjanse porque el humo.
Antonio is barely able to make it back inside his house.
Realmente ahí estaba mi familia, mi esposa, mi hermana, mis hijos y mi sobrino. Pero se puede escuchar, ¿verdad? Los gritos de todos los vecinos.
Eugenio and his team make it to their vehicle, but no farther.
Yo solo vi allá lejos que mis dos compañeros se desaparecieron entre las nubes, ¿verdad? Entonces nosotros, yo traté manera de salir de ahí, pero ya cuando quise salir con mi vehículo fue cuando el vehículo se apagó y me atrapó porque al final. Entonces dije yo, aquí nos quedamos.
Eugenio and his fellow volunteer firefighters are trapped in their stalled vehicle as scalding hot rocks and ash engulf them.
Ese gran calor que sentí ahí dentro del vehículo, que porque están viendo ayuda a la gente. Pero si bajamos y si también nos quedamos con ellos quemados, ¿verdad?
Pyroclastic flows are hot. They're submagmatic temperatures, 1,000 degrees centigrade or 800 degrees centigrade. We cook meat at about 200 degrees centigrade or less. And so anything biotic, anything living in the path of a pyroclastic flow is going to be subjected to such high temperatures that it's immediately incinerated. If you're caught in a pyroclastic flow, then unfortunately you would die. If not from the heat, from the ingestion of particles into your lungs.
The fine particles have been compared to inhaling slivers of glass. For Sophia, it's simply luck that she's still alive.
Everything was completely destroyed. If I hadn't taken the decision and I would have ventured further than I usually do, I would have been in the middle of everything and I wouldn't be alive today.
Eugenio surveys the damage. He's lucky the car has not been buried.
Gracias a Dios, el vehículo nos soportó el calor y eso fue que cuando bajamos del vehículo vimos las personas que estaban alrededor, que estaban muertos, ¿verdad? Quemados, porque también estaban y buscaban personas que todavía estaban con vida, ¿va?
When I came home, I turned on the TV and they said, "We have a problem." But by then everyone was dead.
Miraculously, Eugenio and the team find 3 survivors. They're able to get the car started and rush them to hospital.
Pero lastimosamente, 2 personas fallecieron en el camino. Gracias a Dios, ¿verdad? Que todavía una persona logramos salvarle la vida.
But with the ash settling, the total impact of El Fuego is yet to be felt.
Lahars are deadly. People get trapped and entombed in lahars.
The scope and magnitude of a volcanic eruption can be breathtaking. And the eruption of El Fuego is massive. The ash travels almost 20 kilometers. The ensuing pyroclastic flow burns everything in its path. While his wife, children, and nephews survive, 37 family members are killed.
Mi papá, mis primos, primas, los hijos de mis primos, mi suegra y mi cuñado. Adelante iban 2 primas que una de ellas se cayó y le digo, levántate porque ahí viene, corre ahí. Fallecieron también.
After 16 hours of violent eruptions, Fuego finally settles down. Entire villages are submerged. The remains of those who failed to escape litter the roads. Hundreds are missing or presumed dead. In the days that follow, volunteers mobilize to help emergency efforts.
That's when the military, the police, the firefighters, everyone went there. Problem was the road was covered with pyroclastic flows, so no one could access the community.
Dr. Tufts is one of the first medical personnel to arrive in Zone 0. Because of the dangerous conditions, it's closed to all but the military and select personnel.
Turned out we were the only medical people there. Nobody would enter the Zone 0. The bodies were still everywhere. They didn't look like bodies so much as they looked like a mold of a person because they were covered in ash. The first thing I noticed was the smell. I don't know, it's a smell you never forget. And you look up in the sky and you can see the vultures circling around. Even the pictures don't do justice to what kind of destruction this was. It was like a lunar landscape. And if you were in that particular area, there was no survivors. None. Very hard to swallow.
Aiden volunteers to assist in a nearby village just outside of Zone 0.
We took off, hopped in a truck, and went right to Alotenango, where a lot of the families were devastated with loss. There was Army tanks and first responders everywhere. Locals would tell us they lost their brother, they lost a son, they lost aunt and uncle. We try to help as much as possible.
My focus was immediately on trying to save as many of the people as we could, keeping the firemen healthy so they could do their job. Then we had the survivors that we had to try to take care of. We had to put people to sleep because with burns, they're very painful, so it was easier just to give them an injection. They go to sleep for an hour, and then you could work on them without causing pain.
Over the next few days, El Fuego continues to erupt, triggering a secondary pyroclastic flow. Then, on June 9th, the skies darken and it begins to rain. Just when things can't get worse, they do. With a landscape covered in ash, sometimes meters thick, the threat of lahars looms.
The lahar is the phenomenon, which is where fresh volcanic ash is mixed with water. It's a bit like watery concrete that you've just mixed and is poured down slope. It's very destructive, and they can occur for years after an eruption, whenever there's a big rainstorm. Lahars are deadly because it's like being hit by a wall of liquid cement. People get trapped and entombed in lahars. They will push over buildings. They will knock down infrastructure.
It's very dangerous. People were running away because this time the rain was bringing down all the material that had just been set on the communities.
As the communities surrounding the volcano attempt to deal with the disaster, Sophia is one of the first volunteers gathering aid when she receives a heartbreaking request.
She said, well, I need you to find my family. And I said, okay, just give us their names and we'll try to find them in the shelters, see if they're in the hospital. And that's when she said, no, they died. 33 people in my family died, including my 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and I want you to find them for me.
With that, Sophia starts to recover bodies. In the affected zone, she's shocked by what she sees. The ash is so high, it's buried entire houses. It's so hot, it melts the soles of her shoes.
You see people digging for their loved ones with their hands, with wooden spoons, with whatever they could find. And then when they found them, they would put them in towels or whatever they could find to take them with them. You realize these people are looking for human beings and no one is helping them.
Ayudé a desenterrar a mis primos, primas, hijos de mis primos también. Había veces que no aguantaba.
So we had to start this whole operation of setting camp and security areas and safe spots and doing everything the best way possible. First came the machines who removed the rubble and stones and everything, stones as big as 10 meters or 15 meters. They removed everything. Then we started digging. What we gave them was the possibility of finding their loved ones. It was finding a needle in a haystack, and we were trying to do just that for them.
Months later, volunteers like Aiden, Sophia, and Dr. Tufts continue to help local communities cope with the tragedy. Aiden sets up a campaign to collect donations for the affected.
We were getting notifications saying our account was going viral. Just a large demographic of people just reaching out to us, donating money. We use a lot of the money to buy clothes, just little essentials.
Sophia organizes aid packages and reunites families with their lost loved ones.
We found 278 people. People that were not able to identify because they had no DNA left over, 112. People that were never found, 85.
Amidst the tragedy, there's reason to be thankful.
Sobrevivimos 8, mi esposa, mis 3 hijos, mi hermana y mis 2 sobrinos. Ahí sobrevivimos. En su momento que me sentía un poco tranquilo, una paz en el corazón de que pude encontrar a mucha más gente, vecinos, ¿verdad? Amigos, ¿verdad?
Two years after the tragedy, Sophia and Dr. Tufts continue to volunteer in the community.
One of the positive things that happened was that the entire country said, we need to help. And help was the most beautiful thing you could see.
Sophia comes to terms with the awesome and deadly El Fuego.
I love nature and I love a volcano, and for a while I was very upset because I kept on thinking, how can I love something that it caused so much damage? Then I realized the volcano was always there. It was always going to have eruptions. It was always going to be the beauty of nature exposed. I think nature's not at fault.
While the destruction by El Fuego forever impacted the lives of those living in its shadow, the total impact of eruptions around the world can also create strange, new phenomenon.
There are some lava tubes that contain life that is found nowhere else in the world.
Volcanoes, infamous masters of destruction. Yet they've also forged the world as we know it, sometimes creating incredible environments that almost seem out of this world. Searing molten rock can carve out underground worlds called lava tubes. These mysterious caves are teeming with beauty and life.
Lava tubes are caves that form naturally in lava flows, particularly lava flows of basaltic composition. Basalt is a dense, heavy rock that makes up the Earth's ocean floors and is also the most common type of rock found on planets, particularly Mars and Venus. These flows are very fluid, and as they pour down a landscape, they'll cool against the atmosphere and develop a crust.
As the outer layer of the lava cools and crusts, it forms a roof over top the lava flow. And when the eruption wanes, so does the amount of lava moving beneath.
This leaves a hollow passage behind that can be huge, big enough to drive a truck through.
Despite their name, these cavernous phenomena come in different shapes and sizes.
The term lava tube is a little bit misleading in the sense that it implies that these caves are shaped like the insides of hoses or pipes. But in fact, the shapes of the lava tubes can be quite complex and different. Some, for instance, have broad, flat roofs and floors and are quite wide. Others are slot-like or have the shapes of keyholes. They can occur at multiple levels, split into several stories, and also contain deep pits or chambers. They can stretch from a few hundred feet to tens of miles in length. And in fact, on the island of Hawaii, the Kazamura Cave stretches for over 45 miles. The beginnings of lava tubes, the entrances, may simply be accessed through pits in the ground where the ceiling has collapsed into a pile of rubble. People can clamber down into these dark passageways.
Some lava tubes are open for exploration. For those brave enough to descend into the darkness, treasures await.
There are mineral deposits that you may find on the walls, white gypsum, for instance, and other rare minerals.
The subterranean labyrinth created can reveal lava lakes, stalactites, stalagmites, and other signs of the tube's origins.
As the flow recedes, the lava is draining out from underneath the crust to leave a future cave passage. High water marks or stains on the wall may be left by the lava. So there is a clue to be seen in every cave passage that tells you a story peculiar to the origin and development of that particular cave.
Since their beginnings, these pitch-dark passageways have played a major role in life on islands around the world.
Lava tubes act as excellent insulators for the molten lava that flows through them. And this insulation allows the overall flow containing that lava tube travel much farther and spread more widely. This means that the islands that have lava tube forming volcanoes will be very wide and broad and have gentle slopes.
Volcanic islands are historically highly desirable places to live.
Because of lava tube formation, these wide islands, such as those in the Hawaiian chain, are easily habitable. good climate and soil that breaks down from lava itself, some of the richest in the world.
The tubes themselves have been used by humans for centuries.
Lava tubes have played an important role in the history of humankind. Indigenous peoples have used them as shelters to take during times of conflict, places to camp. They've been used for places to store items and also for burials.
But humans aren't the only beings who benefit from lava tubes. These caves also act as a cradle for other life forms.
Lava tubes also have an important biological function. Creatures that move into these habitats evolve to function quite successfully in these environments. There are some lava tubes that contain insect life that is found nowhere else in the world.
Because of their unique ability to maintain a stabilized environment, lava tubes have recently caught the attention of space scientists.
Recently, lava tubes have become an interesting potential resource recognized by space scientists who are interested in looking into setting up laboratories or exploration posts on other planets, such as Mars. A lava tube has the advantage in an environment like this of having a very steady microclimate relative to the exterior. It's sheltered or protected from the ultraviolet radiation from the sun.
As scientists investigate how lava tubes could play a role in interplanetary exploration, the total impact of volcanoes can reveal otherworldly experiences in unexpected places right here on Earth. While the eruptions of the Hawaiian volcanoes fascinate researchers, 5,000 kilometers southwest, near the Kingdom of Tonga, sailors Michael and Larissa encounter the mysterious effects of a volcanic eruption in the middle of the ocean.
We just left Bora Bora in French Polynesia 7 days earlier, and we were on a direct passage to Fiji.
As they're sailing, they crossed the Tonga Trench. At over 10,000 meters deep, it's the second deepest trench in the world. Located along the Ring of Fire, the trench runs parallel to the boundary of two of the Earth's tectonic plates, the Pacific Ocean and the Indo-Australian Plate. Thousands of meters below them, Michael and Larissa have no idea what's about to explode from the abyss.
We'd been sailing all day, and then during the evening before it was dark, we saw some little bits and pieces of something floating in the water and hitting the boat.
They're surprised to see porous rocks bobbing along the surface of the water. After gathering a few as keepsakes, the couple continue on course toward Fiji. As night falls, Michael takes the first shift while Larissa sleeps.
Michael came and woke me up. There was something floating in the water and hitting the boat. We could just hear this noise along the side of the boat.
Larissa notices the smell of sulfur, and looking out into the dark waters, she sees something strange.
Under the moonlight, it looked like a desert, and the waves were just knocked back to this really slow kind of wave effect over the ocean.
They find themselves in a vast sea of floating rocks.
They are completely flocked together, maybe up to 200-300 millimeters thick on the water, and you cannot see the ocean anymore. It changes the behavior of the waves, and there's a lot of noise coming off them grinding against each other, and it's really like a flexible floating island desert.
The Tonga Trench is home to the longest chain of underwater volcanoes in the world. And just 40 meters underwater, an unnamed volcano near the Kingdom of Tonga had erupted.
Most of the volcanoes in Tonga are actually underwater. There's only a few volcanoes that have made the beautiful conical islands that we typically associate with volcanoes.
As underwater volcanoes spew hot magma into the water, rapid cooling and depressurization creates bubbles by lowering the boiling point of the lava. This violent underwater eruption produces pumice rock, For Michael and Larissa, the recent eruption has put them in the middle of a 120-kilometer wide raft of pumice stone, larger than Manhattan.
As sailors, you're prepared to navigate storms and you have weather forecasting to do so, but you never expect to sail into a subsea volcano. Like, it's not something that can be really forecast, even by the scientists.
People don't often hear about the eruptions or the rafts because the volcanoes are in very remote locations. But also a lot of those volcanoes occur underwater, so pumice rafts are often our only record of that eruption.
One of history's largest pumice rafts was created by the infamous eruption of the Krakatoa volcano off the coast of Indonesia in 1883. The eruption was one of the deadliest in recorded history. The pumice produced clogged harbors and was seen in the Indian Ocean a year later.
Back in the 1883 eruption from Krakatoa, the observations reported trees being supported on the pumice rafts. In the middle of the Indian Ocean, many months after the eruption, boats were passing through these fields of pumice more than 1,000 miles in length. The pumice is still so thick that sailors are actually able to get out and stand fully supported on this pumice in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
These large-scale rafts are not only fascinating, they can also pose a serious threat.
This had made a really good decision for us to take all the sails down and slow right down. So we were just floating along, not too fast, in case we did find a big rock in there that would damage the boat. We had a quick discussion about trying to continue through it, but the fear is there could be something as big as a car or a fridge or a house that could crack our boat and sink us.
And really tiny pieces too, so you can't really start the engines, or you'd be sucking, really tiny pieces into the engine as well.
As was seen after the Krakatoa eruption, hazardous pumice floats can travel thousands of kilometers around the world on ocean currents.
Pumice rafts can float at the ocean surface. They are driven by ocean currents, and therefore pumice can float thousands to tens of thousands of kilometers across the world's oceans.
Scientists are discovering that these mysterious anomalies could hold the key to the long-distance dispersion of many species of plants and animals around the world.
From our studies, we've identified over 100 different species attached to the pumice. Bryozoans, corals, worms, mollusks, crabs, you name it. So each piece of pumice is like its own little community, if you like, that is being transported across the world's oceans. And when we have trillions of pieces of pumice floating out there from an eruption, this diversity of species that is being transported thousands of kilometres in only a matter of months is really quite phenomenal.
As climate change warms the world's oceans, killing corals, floating pumice rafts could offer a small lifeline, carrying new life long distances to endangered reef systems like the Great Barrier Reef.
This is a way that corals that might be living out in Fiji or Tonga, their larvae can attach the pumice and then 7 or 8 months later find their way and end up on the Great Barrier Reef in Eastern Australia. The pumice rafts won't directly mitigate climate change effects on the Great Barrier Reef, but what it is doing is every 5 years or so, it is bringing in a new flux of reef-building organisms, corals, bryozoans, coralline algae, calcareous algae, that are being brought in huge numbers. And with the ability to restock damaged reefs, it's almost like a vitamin shot for the Great Barrier Reef. So it's about this restocking, repopulating in a very natural mechanism by pumice rafts that allows the Great Barrier Reef to be more resilient to then combat and recover from any impacts from climate change.
Michael and Larissa, stranded in an ocean of floating rocks and unable to start the motor, managed to raise the sails and escape.
After we got clear of the pumice raft, we managed to sail around it in the dark, and by the next morning we were well clear of it and on our way.
The pumice rocks that Michael and Larissa collected are now being used to better understand subsea volcanoes.
We're currently investigating these samples very carefully. And in particular, we're going to be looking at the textures, the chemistry of the pumice, which are frozen snapshots of the magma in the chamber that sits beneath that volcano, to really understand what's going on. Pumice rafts are a very fascinating phenomenon. We have life interacting with that pumice, looking for a new home, being transported around the world's oceans. So it's really this interaction of deep earth, oceans, atmospheric processes, and biology all coming together in this one phenomenon.
Mother Nature, she's always in power, basically. The coral reefs around the world are suffering, and then an event like this happens totally unexpected, and it can rejuvenate the reefs and bring new life. So that's really special.
Along with the biodiversity that pumice can bring to ocean life, scientists are now discovering new ways that volcanoes can communicate imminent and deadly eruptions. As long as humans live in the shadow of volcanoes, their eruptions will continue to cause destruction and death. But scientists are searching for better ways to forecast when they'll roar to life and reduce the devastation. David specializes in volcano voice print recognition.
Each volcano has its own voice, and each one produces really unique types of sounds. So just like you have a resonating wave in a musical instrument producing a certain type of sound, we can have the same thing inside a volcano. For a volcano to produce sound, it needs to erupt, and it needs to have some sort of open pathway to the surface. So if there's just magma underground moving around, that will just be producing seismic waves. But as soon as the volcano opens up and releases pressure, then it can produce a sound wave.
Recording their voices entails recording infrasound from the volcano. Like infrasounds produced by elephants and whales to communicate over long distances, these low-frequency sound waves can't be heard by humans, but they can be felt as vibrations.
So what we're recording with infrasound is generally between the lava surface and the atmosphere.
The sound waves, made by vibrations traveling through volcano passageways, reveal details about the shape of the volcano's crater and if the lava levels are rising.
If the lava is rising within the crater, we can often detect that.
Because infrasound is produced at incredibly low frequencies, well below the threshold for human hearing, scientists are able to set up at safe distances from the volcano.
The really useful thing about infrasound is that it can travel very long distances. These low-frequency sound waves can travel thousands of kilometers. And we can put out an array of microphones or sensors and monitor over a broad region. These pressure sensors or microphones will record the sound, and then once it's back at our lab, we can analyze it. We can set up these algorithms to detect eruptions.
Early detection means more warning time for eruptions.
We can help communities that live around volcanoes by very rapidly detecting an eruption and telling you how big that eruption is.
While studying volcanic voices is a relatively new avenue for volcanology, it shows a lot of promise. Currently, it's best used in combination with other technologies. Robert studies and interprets satellite imagery.
Anything that affects a change on the surface of the Earth, you'll be able to see with Planet Satellite. Planet's data is useful because we're viewing the entire Earth every day. So that really gives a big picture of how the Earth is evolving over time. For volcanic eruptions, we can help monitor an eruption as it is ongoing. So with satellite data, you could actually map where they were going. By knowing where a dome is growing and how big it's getting, as well as being able to map the area of a volcano and look for channels that this material might flow down, you can really help mitigate the risk and sort of be able to predict where these flows will occur.
In the future, combining satellite tech with volcano voice recognition could be the answer to saving countless lives. For now, volcanoes still remain vastly shrouded in mystery.
el volcán, o sea, no avisa cuando esto sucede, cuando no avisa en un momento. Cuando un momento u otro, pues, da la erupción, no avisa cuando realmente ocurre un gran desastre, ¿verdad?
Volcanoes. Deadly. Destructive. Terrifying. Yet volcanoes have played a crucial role in shaping the Earth. And their total impact includes the formation of islands, lava tubes, and pumice rafts that can help spread life around the planet. And while there is no way to control them, in the future, listening to the voices of volcanoes may allow us to live more safely amongst these towering titans.
It's rare.
This is a powerful wind, enough to knock over a tree.
It's unique.
2 more steps.
It's Mother Nature at her strangest.
I pretty well had decided I wasn't going to survive.
These are the stories from people who work in extreme weather.
Oh, we just lost a big window.
It was just like a bomb went off. And nobody is coming to save you.
And the storms they'll never forget.
Wham! Crack! Bang! Bang! Bang!
Holy we're going to die.
Plus, the how and why behind the world's worst weather.
Mother Nature is one mother.
Mother Nature can dish out some strange weather. These phenomena may be explained by science, but sometimes are so rare they cannot be explained at all. Volcanoes trigger some of the strangest weather on the planet, as was the case on a small remote island called Ambro.
Ambrim volcano is in Vanuatu in the southwest Pacific. And Ambrim is very special because it doesn't have a lake of water, it has a lake of lava. That lava lake is somewhere between 1,100 degrees Celsius and 1,200 degrees Celsius. You do not want to fall into that lake. You do not want to take a swim into that lake because you will dissolve. Think of the Earth as an egg, and the eggshell is the crust. The white of the egg is the mantle, and the yellow part is the core. The mantle is the part of the Earth underneath the crust, which is relatively thin, and magma, which eventually gets out onto the surface as lava, ultimately comes from the mantle, not from the core, but from the mantle. So why do some volcanoes erupt all the time, and why do some volcanoes erupt intermittently and go back to sleep and so forth? Has to do with the nature of the plumbing system. So a volcano that's erupting all the time must have a well-established plumbing system between the mantle and the surface, which is a pretty amazing thing, actually.
An active volcano emits gases, and when these gases collide with Mother Nature, the result is a strange weather phenomenon called acid rain. The results can be deadly, especially for the brave few who dare to venture inside the heart of the volcano.
My name is George Karunas. I'm a professional explorer and storm chaser. I've spent the past 20 years exploring the most extreme places on Earth, from the most ferocious weather to erupting volcanoes. I've been fascinated with volcanoes since I was a little kid. You can stand on a volcano and see the lava coming out of it and understand civilization as we know it could be wiped out because of a very large eruption.
Oh, standing up to the edge, unbelievably hot. It just burns your face, burns your ears. With the protection on, I can stand there, but without it, I can feel the heat just from here, and it's unbelievably hot.
melted my boots on volcanoes. I have had to dodge pieces of lava flying through the air. I just can't get enough of them. In August 2014, I was part of an expedition that brought us to the island of Ambrym with the goal of not just going and visiting the volcano, but to descend 1,200 feet down inside. There's only 5 places in the world where these lakes of lava exist. And I thought for years that I would never get the opportunity to go there because it's too difficult, it's too dangerous, it's too expensive, but I was finally able to fulfill that dream.
But for George, a sudden change in weather would quickly turn that dream into a nightmare.
I thought I'd seen it all. I got a little more than I bargained for.
On a volcano, there are gases being emitted all the time. And when those gases interact with rainwater, the rainwater becomes acidic, extremely acidic, because the gases that are being emitted from the volcano are highly acid in nature.
All right, gentlemen, let's get suited up.
At the top of the volcano, George and his lava-chasing team prepare for a thrilling but highly dangerous adventure.
There's 100% uncertainty on every step of this expedition. At the summit of that volcano, there's very little chance of any kind of assistance or rescue. And there's a constant cloud of gas nearby. If there's any type of rain happening or even the chance of rain, we won't even bother trying to descend down, because once you begin that process, you're locked in.
To ascend quickly from craters and out of danger, climbers often carry a specialized piece of equipment.
Hook this one on.
The most important piece of equipment, a device called an act safe, which is a gasoline-powered rope ascender. Think of it as a lawnmower engine that you clip to your climbing harness. You can then thread your rope through it, pull it to start it. It has a throttle, and it will act like your own personal elevator to pull you up to get you out of the crater. Without it, you're in big trouble. The crater itself is 1,200 feet deep. That's deeper than the Empire State Building is tall. So imagine having to rappel down almost a straight cliff with a pool of boiling lava below you.
Looks good. Good? All right, let's do this into the furnace.
His backpack loaded with safety gear.
See you boys later.
George begins his descent into the jaws of the crater.
I had done a fair amount of rappelling inside volcanoes already, but this was my deepest rappel. So I was a little nervous. That first overhang is a bit intimidating because it's a straight drop, about 300 feet. You can smell the volcano, and every now and then, the wind will blow. You'll feel a little bit of the heat on your face, even though it's still several hundred meters away. And you look over your shoulder, and there's the glowing pit of lava right behind you. A little bit at a time, descend a little bit at a time. It takes several hours to rappel from base camp down to the bottom. It's like descending into the belly of the earth.
Exhausted after hours spent climbing down the crater, George finally makes it to the bottom.
Hey, George, y'all good? Just reached the bottom, guys. Copy that. Talk to me if you need to.
There are few places on planet Earth that are more desolate, dangerous. It feels almost like setting foot on a new planet. And with that suit, feeling very much like an astronaut, you walk over to the edge of the lava. It gets louder and louder, and it sounds like the devil's washing machine. The lake of lava is about 60 or 70 meters across. And from the point at the very edge where I'm standing, it's a 20-meter drop straight into liquid rock. 2 more steps, sploosh. And just look out on the waves, literal waves of liquid rock crashing against the side. It makes the sound like being at the beach, but deeper. You could probably count on one hand the number of people that have stood in that spot.
For 30 minutes, George explores the crater, unaware of ominous rain clouds rapidly forming around the volcano. Although George's team members were aware of the rain,
hey George,
they were unaware of its effect.
What's up, guys? We got some rain here at base. You might want to consider coming back.
When you're at the bottom of the crater, you can't see the horizon, so there's no way for you to know if there's bad weather coming.
It's getting pretty heavy, George. I'd recommend you come back. All right, headed back up. Copy that.
The rain had started, and it wasn't just a light drizzle. It was starting to really come down.
Rain that falls through volcanic gas clouds can be as corrosive as battery acid, causing serious damage to anything or anyone it touches.
This acid is so destructive that it will eat away at all kinds of materials. Within a matter of minutes, I could see the coating on my aluminum heat suit starting to slough off because of the acidity. Now I'm thinking, great, I have to ascend through this rain. And this is going to be nothing but awful for the next 2 hours, because there's no shortcut. If anything goes wrong at the bottom, you might as well be on the summit of Everest. You might as well be on another planet, because nobody is going to come to rescue you. I go to start my ascender, and the starting cable comes off in my hand. Here I am, 1,200 feet down, and my only means of egress has now split in two. And the string on the starter cord was damaged by the acid.
The starter cord on George's gasoline-powered ascender is his lifeline. Without the ascender, he has no hope of escaping the volcano as toxic rain pours down on him. But fortunately for George, before it broke, the cord did its job.
Guys, you copy?
Copy, George Base.
I got the motor started, but this thing just broke on me. If it stops, I'm done for. You're gonna have to be at the top watching for me, all right?
Copy that, we're on the way.
Luckily, it started on that first pull. Gave it some gas and started walking up as it pulled me.
There's no time to lose. George needs to get out now. And the only way out is straight up, outside and exposed to the acid rain.
It was awful. I was trying to ascend with a broken piece of equipment that, if it had stalled, would have trapped me and stranded me. And meanwhile, the acid rain was still coming down. And I can tell that it's very strong acid rain. Stronger than what we get at base camp, because at the bottom of the crater, there's even more gas above you. So the strength of this acid is unlike anything I've ever experienced.
If you were in the crater and it was raining and there was a lot of gas coming out of the volcano, the rain would be intensely acid. If you were taking pictures with a camera, you would probably fairly quickly notice that the camera would stop working because the camera would start getting corroded. Anything metallic will be ruined. A cell phone will be ruined by this intense acidity, just simply because the acidity is so strong, so elevated.
In addition to acid rain, volcanoes create strange weather in other ways. When lava flows into groundwater, it creates steam explosions, forcing small pebbles or large rocks to shoot into the air, called ballistic projectiles. We are familiar with volcanic ash carried by wind. However, if wind dies down while a volcano is active, gas and other pollutants can create a volcanic smog known as fog. Drained from the heat and his descent into the volcano, George inches up the 1,200-foot deep crater. His only hope of escape, a motorized lifeline with a broken starter cord.
The last thing in the world I want is for this thing to stall with me on the rope. And I'm thinking, oh, please stop raining. Please don't stall.
As George slowly and steadily ascends the crater, acid rain eats away at his ropes.
Please don't stall. Please don't stall. Please don't stall.
In these brutal conditions, George knows his equipment won't hold out much longer.
There are few things more miserable than being cold, wet, and not just being soaked in water, but being soaked in acid. When the raindrops hit your face, it starts to burn your eyes and sting your skin, and you taste that acrid, metallic flavor in your mouth. It was painful. My eyes were stinging. And I wear contact lenses. So it makes things even more difficult for me. I'm worried about my rigid, gas-permeable contact lenses literally dissolving inside my eye sockets. So I'm trying to wipe my eyes when I can and trying to keep the machine from stalling.
Come on! Finally, after 3 agonizing hours, George makes it to the upper rim of the volcano and safety.
By the time I got to the top, I was soaked to the bone. All my gear was busted, but it felt so good to get back to base camp, knowing that I was alive.
If I were going to visit a lava lake at an active volcano, the first thing I would do is make sure somebody knew where I was going. And in terms of acid rain, which I think is a very interesting problem in this case, knowing the weather patterns is very important as well. And so you would choose the time of the year, which is the driest to go. There still will be a chance of rain, but the probability will be lower.
Wow. This was a serious malfunction, bordering on catastrophic.
Believe that?
All it takes is a few things to compound together to create an absolute tragedy. There was a good chance that I could have to spend hours trapped in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. This is a place that is not conducive to human life. I've actually done several expeditions again back to that exact crater. However, we take a few more precautions now.
I'm about 30 meters away from the lake of lava. I gotta put my heat suit on.
And I'll probably go back there again.
Strange weather, like acid rain, is created by the random mixture of a volcanic eruption colliding with a rainstorm. And just as bizarre is when winds combine with mountains. They accelerate out of control and literally rip trees out of the ground. When you think of Idaho, you don't usually think of strange weather, but being only 350 miles from the Pacific Ocean, its mountain ranges are positioned perfectly to trap severe weather systems, and sometimes bizarre events can occur. There's an expression that residents of Idaho are known to say: if you don't like the weather, just wait 15 minutes. However, 15 minutes can lead to strange and life-threatening weather. Benjamin Earwicker's love of the outdoors began when he was 7 and continues today. He's traveled to 37 different countries, and he's hiked through most of them.
I'm an avid backpacker and hiker ever since I grew up in the mountains of Central Oregon in the Pacific Northwest. I love being in the outdoors. I love being in the backcountry whenever possible. Well, wind is something that I think about whenever we pick a campsite. I try to find shelter so that we're protected from the wind, because in the middle of the night, if we're out in a flimsy ultralight tent, the wind can really change the dynamics. It can actually be quite dangerous if there are trees nearby. I think I'm educated by both experience and by taking the time to prepare myself to be in the backcountry and in these situations that are oftentimes unpredictable. I try to prepare myself so that I know what I'm up against, so that I'm prepared in the event that something goes wrong.
Oh, it's recording.
Oh, hi.
So this is our sleeping quarters for the night.
So I've hiked and backpacked on 5 different continents in 30+ countries around the world, and I know how to handle myself in a range of situations and weather patterns, except this one time.
Go, go.
So in terms of the interaction of wind and complex terrain, what we can sometimes see happening is in areas of higher elevation, when the winds sort of line up near the surface and aloft from one direction, it's a very stable situation. Those winds can then sink suddenly as they come down through a steep valley or the lee side of a mountain. The winds can accelerate as they go down the slope, pick up speed as they go. For at the base of the valley, when those winds hit, again, could be a very dangerous situation.
Scientists have long been perplexed as to why in cyclone winds, trees are not pulled out of the ground. Studies have confirmed that there is a magic breaking point. Literally, only after wind speeds of 90 miles per hour do trees break, no matter what their size or diameter.
In terms of trees falling down in the wind, yes, this is something that can happen. A lot depends on the type of tree. Shallow-rooted trees in wet soil can be much more susceptible to being knocked over by strong winds, whereas more deeply rooted trees in somewhat harder soil, it's going to take stronger winds to damage them.
Oh, man. I can't wait.
June 2012. It started as a fun adventure.
Yeah, I agree.
Benjamin planned a 32-mile hike in the mountains near Crooked River with his good friend.
I currently live in Boise, Idaho, which is about 2 hours south of the Crooked River area. Crooked River's in the central mountains of Idaho. Former mining town, a lot of beautiful mountains. So this was a trip that was just really close to home, nothing exotic, nothing out of the ordinary, just a nice, easy weekend backpacking trip. So we thought. When we looked at the weather forecast, it was projected to be sunny, maybe a little bit of precipitation, but nothing out of the ordinary. So we thought this was a great weekend to go up and do some biking, do a little hiking and camping.
Where are we going?
And we stashed our mountain bikes so that we could find them later and they'd be protected.
We're about right here.
Then our plan was to do a 13-mile loop back to the bikes.
Oh, okay, yeah, that shouldn't be too far then.
And then go on the rest of the loop on bike. So we dropped the bikes, we drove down, parked the car, and started out on our trip. Beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky.
Although there was not a cloud in the sky, this was Idaho, and in 15 minutes, the weather could totally change.
At that point, we had been hiking for about 4 or 5 hours, so we had made it up over the first ridge. We're not worried about anything. I can see the clouds starting to build in the distance, and we thought, well, we might get a rain shower later tonight, but it's far enough away that we weren't too worried at that point.
It'll get better by the time we keep walking.
We're enjoying kind of a meandering hike along the forested hills, the ponderosa pines. Just a beautiful day in central Idaho. So the area we were hiking in is filled with a lot of different fir trees and pine trees, but ponderosa pines are one of the striking features of this part of the country. Ponderosa pines are a very large, sturdy pine. They can often be 60 to 80 feet tall.
You know about those bugs that eat the trees, some sort of insect. Oh, really?
And all of a sudden, I heard a huge ponderosa pine fall down.
What was that?
Fortunately for us, the tree fell in the opposite direction, toward the hill on the opposite bank. But had it faced us, it would have easily spanned the crooked river at that point. And all of a sudden, the wind starts to pick up. And pine needles start to blow at us down this canyon. And debris is being kicked up by this wind, and it increasingly grows within about a 5 to 10 minute period. Those clouds that we had seen in the distance were becoming more and more ominous, billowing up, much larger than before, and getting closer.
True to Idaho's weather patterns, within 10 minutes, unexpected wind has entered the downslope of the valley. The winds haven't just shown up, they have sped up.
Within about 30 seconds of the first tree falling, we heard a second, and then a third tree fall around us.
Go, go.
The hair stood up on the back of my neck. I was prepared for just about any other weather condition, rain, snow, thunder shower. But when the wind started picking up and throwing debris at us, I thought something's different this time.
The backpackers decide to seek immediate shelter.
What's going through my mind is the thought that this is a powerful wind enough to knock over a tree. What happens if another tree falls directly on us? I could barely keep my eyes open because of all the dust and debris that at this point was swirling around us. So it wasn't just gusts of wind blowing debris every couple of seconds. This was a circular, powerful wind that was pushing us forward on the trail. And we knew in that instant that we had to find shelter, and we had to find shelter fast.
With trees crashing all around, finding shelter fast was not going to be easy.
We thought, where do we need to go to be protected from the trees? So we thought the only place that we can see is the creek bed itself.
Well, you don't see wind, but the dangerous thing about these strong wind events is what you're seeing is what the wind has picked up, bits of trees. You're not seeing the wind, but you're seeing physically what that wind may have picked up, and it's really that flying debris that causes the concerns for injuries and death.
So we get down next to this ledge, down by the river, and as we're doing that, we're hearing trees still falling into the river. And we're finally feeling like, okay, we made the right decision. We've got out of harm's way. The trees are still falling, but at least if they fall on us, we're protected. And then I start to hear kind of a rustling in the shale and in the rocks. And there's a coiled up rattlesnake hidden in the rocks about arm's length from me at that point. Coiled up, potentially ready to strike. At this point, the car is probably 8 to 9 miles away. Our bikes are at least 6 miles away. So we had no easy solution to get out of there. And at this point, we knew that we couldn't go back where we came from because our path had been blocked by the falling trees. Our best bet at this point was to find a large boulder or a rock face that we could then shelter next to. The wind is still howling, the trees are still falling down. So we find a rock outcropping in the distance. And right as we're heading towards this rock, we look up, and in the same spot that we're headed is a small brown bear. We could hear the bear and perhaps another bear calling to one another, making noises to signal their location. So the sound I heard was kind of like a low growl, kind of like a ruh, ruh. But in that moment, we didn't have a choice because we couldn't stay there The wind is howling, the trees are falling. We have to get shelter under this rock.
What we find is animals in some cases have that sixth sense, the realization that there's a forest fire nearby and they're evacuating that area, the realization that there could be a storm brewing, perhaps a change in atmospheric pressure is causing those animals to move to another area. So there does seem to be some innate ability within Mother Nature to recognize the advance of a storm.
So at this point, we make a run for it. And we take off sprinting down this path, and we make it past where we heard the low growling sound from the bushes to a granite slab.
Hey, over here. I think we're good here.
And we decided that at that point, we needed to find shelter there and perhaps stay there the night. We were under the granite slab for at least 9 hours.
Oh, jeez.
I had thoughts of whether or not we would even make it out of this situation. The danger to us physically was very real. It was very tangible, palpable. I felt that one or both of us could be injured or killed by these falling trees. This was a pretty restless night for me. The storm continued to brew over time. I would say the wind died down after probably 2 to 3 hours, but then we would have gusts of wind all night long. Most of that time, I was just listening and waiting and hoping that a tree wouldn't fall. So the next morning when we were able to hike out, we stopped counting fallen trees that had fallen across the path after 40 or 45 trees. What I've learned from this experience is that no matter how well prepared you are, you have to expect the unexpected. You have to be prepared for what you can't possibly imagine. This is the wilderness. Weather is unpredictable. We can't control what's going to happen no matter what the weather forecast says. So now when I backpack, when I'm out in the wilderness, I'm thinking about what are the weather conditions, what is the wind going to do, and how will that impact my choices. So the interesting thing about wind, you can't touch it, you can't see it. It's kind of one of those ethereal things that happens when you're out in nature. We don't think about wind. It's one of those things that happens to you or that you can't really see. You see its impact.
Go, go.
And that was the weather event that I will never forget.
Rain mixed with gases can be deadly. Wind mixed with nature can be catastrophic. Mix rain and wind together and add a rare phenomenon that only Mother Nature can explain, and you have a recipe for disaster. Nebraska is a common state for tornadoes in the United States, sitting right in the middle of Tornado Alley, with an average of over 60 tornadoes a year, 19 in the month of June alone. Between June 16th and 18th, 2014, this area was hit by 76 tornadoes, and once 2 tornadoes at the same time. A rare phenomenon called twin tornadoes hit the small town of Pilger, Nebraska. Population 350. Gene Willers was the president of the local bank. He has lived his entire life in this state and has witnessed tornadoes since he was a young boy.
My name is Gene Willers. I'm a retired bank president. I've been in banking most of my life. In a village such as Pilger, we don't have a lot of turnover. Our location is a small location. We have 7 employees. I think of my staff as family. Pretty close relationship. You care about each other. It's an important part of it. I guess I'm here talking about weather, not as an expert, but as someone that's lived through it. Growing up on a farm in Nebraska, we watch the weather. It's just part of our makeup. And so we take storm warnings very seriously. We always are aware of our surroundings as far as our weather and where we can take shelter, those type of things. was thinking the other day, how many tornado warnings have I been through? Somewhere around 30. I'm not a stranger to tornadoes, no. But this is one I'll never forget.
Gene may not have been a stranger to tornadoes, but this day was going to bring a rare phenomenon: twin tornadoes.
A twin tornado are two tornadoes, separate tornadoes, but they originate from one supercell thunderstorm.
Normally, one tornado is formed from one supercell. Scientists know how tornadoes are formed. However, they still don't know why some thunderstorms produce tornadoes and why others do not.
A twin tornado is very rare. On average, studies have shown that maybe you will see every 10 to 15 years one supercell thunderstorm produce two separate tornadoes. But we don't have a lot of data on twin tornadoes to begin with. For all we know, they're probably even more rare, upwards of 30, maybe even 40 years.
June 16, 2014. It was like any other working day for Gene. With one last appointment to attend in a neighboring town, Gene was looking forward to a game of golf after work. Little did Gene know that this typical day was just the calm before the storm, ×2.
I made a tee time at the Stanton Golf Course, which is about 10 miles to the west. When I saw the weather in the morning on television, it indicated that we were in a moderate risk area. After I left the meeting mid-afternoon, I could see that things were developing, that we were probably going to have some thunderstorms. And so I called and canceled the tee time.
No, golf's not going to happen today.
Instead of going home, I decided just to drop by the bank and tidy up a few things and then go home. There was possibilities of some sightings. It was concerning. As I came closer to Pilger, it was getting worse. It was muggy. Clouds were spinning quite a bit, and that's a little bit unusual. You just don't see that very often. That was a sign of things to come.
A distracted Gene leaves his cell phone in his car and heads into the bank. Gene arrives back at the bank shortly before closing.
Afternoon. Was going to pop in for 15 minutes and then go. There were a couple matters that I wanted to take care of and talk to employees about. Most of the weather stations in Nebraska offer storm alerts that will come on your cell phone. About that time, the employees, at least 3 or 4, had alerts, and you could just hear them going off like all over the place. And I think one employee actually had a National Weather Service alert on theirs. You know, I was in my office, I heard these warnings going off, and they were almost all simultaneous, you know, so I looked out the window, you know, and saw that it had gotten worse. It was getting darker. One of the employees took a call, and it was from a storm spotter. They had spotted a tornado southwest of Pilger heading our way.
Okay. No, you have to stay here. Everyone, gather around.
It was too late for the employees to leave.
We don't have time to go home.
And our emergency plan calls for using the vault as the storm shelter.
I got my grandkids.
I knew that was going to be the safest place for them to be.
The safest place is in the vault. We've got to get in there now.
One of the people in the bank that day was a repairman for our bank vault company. I asked him if the door could be locked from the inside, and he indicated to me, no, it can't be locked from the inside.
Realizing someone had to stay outside the vault to lock the door, Bank President Gene Willers takes charge and delegates the staff, possibly for the last time.
And I just said, get in the vault. And they could see the look on my face. They were not going to question it. So they went in the vault.
You'll be safe. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Everyone, stay there. Stay safe.
2 employees from the accounting office, the vault repairman, and then the employees that were there. I'm usually a fairly laid-back guy, but you get to the point you feel kind of like I don't want to say captain of the ship, but you know, for lack of a better term, somebody has to take responsibility to see that everyone's safe. I'm a family man. I've always felt that way about my family, and they were my family too.
And as captain of the ship, Gene made the heroic move to save his staff and possibly go down with his ship.
There's a wheel that you turn, but there's also, you spin the tumblers to lock it. And I didn't do that. I latched it and turned the wheel so it was tight. I was afraid if something happened to me that it would be difficult for somebody to open that door.
We're gonna die in here!
After I had latched the door, I went back to the windows, and at that point I could see 2 tornadoes southwest of town, probably 2 to 3 minutes away. I didn't stay there very long.
Gene made a quick decision based on his experience of tornadoes in the past.
I decided to go down the steps into the crawl space.
You're not dealing with just one funnel cloud. Now you're dealing with 2 separate tornadoes, and you cannot predict where a tornado is going. Maybe they're wrapping around each other. Maybe they're going in separate directions from each other. You may have to deal with the first tornado that comes and impacts your area. You may not even know that a second one is directly behind it.
Gene goes into survival mode.
So I went into the crawl space underneath the bank. At about that time, the electricity got cut. I could hear the siren going, but other than that, it was just eerily silent. I'm a man of faith, so I prayed. At this point, when I realized we're going to get a direct hit, I pretty well had decided I wasn't going to survive. My thoughts were, I hope I made the right decision with the vault. My wife, how's she going to do without me? The children, grandchildren, those type of things. I didn't have my phone, so I couldn't communicate with her. In essence, I was alone, very alone. I started just hearing kind of rumbling. The air pressure was changing, so I knew it was coming.
With speeds up to 200 miles per hour, this was going to be bad.
At that point, when I started feeling, ears popping, those type of things, I knew we were gonna get hit. It was like 2 freight trains hitting head on. That's how loud it was. It was very loud at that point. The floor above me was being sucked up somewhat, just bouncing, and so I knew we were getting a direct hit. It probably wasn't that long of a time, but it seemed like forever.
It took only 81 seconds for the twin tornadoes to take down the bank and the town of Pilger.
Longest 81 seconds that ever happened, I think, in my mind. There was debris on the steps. I had to clear that out to get up the steps. And I didn't realize the extent of the damage till I got up the steps.
It appears Gene is the only one that survived.
Because that floor had been pulled up somewhat, there were a lot of things laying around, desks, chairs, debris everywhere. And it looked like World War III outside of the bank.
Half the bank was now gone. But what about Gene's staff? Were they gone as well?
I had no idea what kind of condition the people were, and I couldn't hear them. And as I pulled the door open, they were all more or less huddled together in the back of the vault.
Is everyone okay? Come on, come on.
They came out, did a little hugging. Everybody it was just a flood of relief.
It's insane. It is crazy.
The only part of the bank that remained was the vault was supporting the north half of the ceiling, but that was about it. I mean, it was totally destroyed.
What remained of the bank's structure was deemed unsalvageable. Machines were brought in to tear it down completely.
We did have 2 deaths from the storm. That was tragic. You always, in the back of your mind, you wonder how you react in situations, you know. And I think I reacted well and responsibly. And I think the community, and especially my employees, feel good about what I did. And I thank God for his protection. I guess this storm had quite an impact on my life. I was 1 year from retirement, and I needed to stay on longer, so I spent another extra year and a half working to replace the bank. Also, the community was about 75% destroyed. The storm itself has changed the whole makeup of the community. Typical small rural community made up of a lot of older people, rental houses. Those people all left. So the population is probably 40% lower than it was. The downtown area was totally wiped out. I was recognized by the Red Cross, and every year Iowa and Nebraska has a rivalry football game. It's called the Heroes Game. And I was recognized there along with an individual from Iowa, and which I was appreciative. People really need to take these situations seriously. It's an awful thing. It's something that you can't describe. It's something to be avoided at all costs. I think the reason that this receives so much coverage is because 2 tornadoes of that magnitude side by side is really rare. That was the day weather changed my life.
Wildfires. Created by a deadly weather combination of heat, drought, and wind, they can destroy everything in their path.
Go, 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 go!
These are the stories from people who work in extreme weather.
Boom. We just lost a big window.
It was just like a bomb went off.
Holy
And nobody is coming to save you.
And the storms they'll never forget.
Wham! Crack! Bang! Bang! Bang!
Holy we're going to die.
Plus, the how and why behind the world's worst weather.
Mother Nature is one mother.
Extreme weather is ravaging the planet, now more than ever before. Hotter and drier climate conditions provide the perfect fuel to literally feed the fire. Around the globe, wildfires are growing larger, more numerous, and deadlier every year.
We're looking at more wide and varied extreme events. That means potentially longer and more fearsome droughts and heat waves. And that essentially is how wildfires are born. You have a stretch of very dry conditions, throw in a few lightning strikes and wind, bingo, you have a fearsome fire.
Wildfires can also create their own weather systems. The extreme heat causes water from trees and plants to evaporate into the air. This additional moisture then creates clouds that not only look like thunderclouds, they act like them too. During a wildfire, no place is safe, not even on a lake.
From my experience as a photojournalist, I've seen many wildfires, and I've realized that they can move very violently. One of the areas that I've found to be a safe haven are lakes because of all the water, but all that changed.
For over 25 years, Greg Welch and his wife Julie have been avid hikers and kayakers. But within 24 hours of their arrival in Boundary Waters, Greg and Julie's comfortable camping trip will go up in smoke.
Greg! Julie!
September 2000, a hot, dry, windy day. As Greg and Julie enter the park, they are greeted with an ominous sign.
There was actually some smoke coming across the road, and there was some ash coming down from the sky.
A park ranger flags them down and alerts them to the situation. A forest fire caused by a lightning strike has been burning for 3 weeks.
He wanted to know where we were going to make sure we were going to be safe, and he gave us some tips on areas not to go to, and basically told us that the fire was quite contained, was not moving rapidly at the time, and we should have no problems at all.
The fire is 14 miles west of their destination.
He did say that we should expect to see some smoke within our area because the wind was blowing from the west and we were east of the fire. So that should not surprise us to see some smoke in the area.
From his experience with forest fires, Greg is confident the fire is at a safe enough distance.
All right, thanks a lot.
He and Julie set out, undeterred by the fire blazing far away.
We really didn't consider ourselves to be in any danger at that time. We were very much enjoying the day for what it was. It was a very warm, pleasant day, light breeze, sunny. When we left the lake in our kayaks, we just enjoyed the nice, warm day.
Thank you. Looks good.
It's a good spot, yeah.
Around 2 p.m., winds pick up and begin to gust, just as Greg and Julie spot a suitable campsite on the lake's western shore.
At that time, we were experiencing smoke coming into the area, and my wife and I thought back about when we had talked to the ranger, and it didn't give us a lot of concern because he told us that we would experience some smoke in the area, so it was not a big concern for us at the time.
Thank you, yeah. The science of wildfires is fairly well understood. It's two real issues. You need the fuel, which is tinder-dry forests, grasslands, that sort of thing, and wind is the other component. The faster the wind, the faster the fire spreads.
They set up camp, but Greg and Julie can no longer ignore the warning signs. Where there's smoke, there's fire.
You know what?
We were looking at the sky, and it became more of an ominous, smoke-filled sky. So I got my camera and I started taking pictures of the lake, of the trees, and of the sky. And when I reviewed the pictures, what I could see in the pictures was something we could not see with our eyes. And that was orange streaks kind of shooting through the sky. We couldn't see it with our eyes because of all the smoke that was in the area. That was when we decided that we actually may have a problem. This thing may be actually moving at us. We were also hearing some small noises back in the woods, and it sounded like tree branches breaking, but way off in the distance, just a little snap and then another snap. Not very quickly, but repetitively. So I told my wife I'm gonna run up to a little creek that was just north of where we were camping, and I was gonna look down that creek to see if I could get a better view of what was going on.
As he rounds the bend of the river, Greg is not prepared for what he's about to see.
What I saw was just a very surrealistic scene. The fire was everywhere.
The fire that was 14 miles west of them is now just 3/4 of a mile away.
I was pretty terrified at that moment because I very quickly realized how quick and how close the fire actually was.
Julie!
My first thought after seeing the fire was my wife.
Julie!
Julie, we gotta go. We gotta go now.
Julie! Fire's coming!
Those noises got much louder, and instead of tree branches breaking, now it sounded like trees breaking.
Julie, we gotta go!
We grabbed the last bag.
As Julie heads to the kayak,
Come on, let's go!
Greg grabs her life jacket.
You could really hear the fire coming through the woods now. It was very violent, very noisy, very dark and smoky, and very disorientating. I wasn't even sure I was going the right direction. You could definitely feel the heat, though. I brought the life jacket down to Julie and told her to go. And as soon as she left the shoreline, she disappeared into the smoke.
Hikers Greg and Julie Welch are surrounded.
Come on, let's go!
Their last resort is to escape onto the lake, as water is a safe place during a fire. Or is it?
As I was still standing there on land, the fire actually came over the bank behind the smoke, and it literally was blowing over my head. Trees were lighting on fire all around me, and of course I knew at that point I needed to get away from the land, so I pushed off from shore and headed out into the lake.
Julie loses sight of Greg and cries out his name.
Greg! Greg!
But the raging fire is louder than a screaming freight train.
She was very concerned about me because she's witnessed the fire coming over the shoreline into the lake area. In her mind, she had thought I may not have made it at that point. I could hear her, but she could not hear me.
Julie! Greg!
And then as the smoke kind of lifted off the lake for a second, we could see each other. So that was a nice moment where we knew that both of us were okay.
With the forest ablaze, Greg and Julie think they will be safe on the water.
The wind that was pushing the fire was upwards of 50 miles an hour. Lots of ash in the sky, lots of soot building up in our eyes and our nostrils and our mouths. My immediate thought was asphyxiation from the smoke. It's kind of like being in a house fire without any doors to get out. Julie was in a separate kayak, and the smoke was kind of picked up off the lake for a second by the wind. and it actually blew her sideways and literally flipped her out of her kayak into the water.
Surrounded by a sea of flames and choked by smoke, Greg tries to rescue Julie from the frigid northern lake.
Julie, drop my paddle!
But I couldn't do it because the wind was so strong, I couldn't get to her. So I jumped out of my kayak into the water to slow myself down. And in about 10 minutes' time, we were together again in the water, hanging onto the kayak. At that point, we kind of took in the scene around us, which now was just as black as midnight, full of smoke. Everything was on fire. No matter where we looked in 360 degrees around us, everything was on fire.
It's the battle of their lives. 50-mile-an-hour winds continue to feed the killer blaze.
Everything was totally engulfed in fire, so our thoughts were about staying out in the lake. But it took a lot of energy to do that because of all the waves and the wind. The water temperature was, 50 degrees. My wife was starting to shake uncontrollably. So we decided that we were going to make landfall because we were getting hypothermia. We could see a piece of land that looked like it had not been on fire. So I climbed up on top of the rock, pulled the kayak up on the rock, and as we were doing that, it started to rain. It was a very violent, strong downpour of water. The rain got stronger and harder and faster, and it actually felt more like buckets of water coming down on us than it did like rain showers. Very violent, very dramatic amount of water coming down. So it was a very intimidating night.
What happened next took them by surprise. As quickly as the downpour started, it stopped. Without warning, everything changed.
You very quickly realized that all the noise that was being produced by the fire that we had been experiencing for about an hour just stopped. I mean, instantly. And the smoke started to clear. The rain had actually put the fire out.
As hot air rises above a wildfire, the moisture from burned vegetation condenses into rain clouds. Rainfall from these clouds can extinguish the very fire that created them. They survived the fire, but as a cold front moves in, will they survive the night?
We decided that we needed to stay there on that land for the night. It was too late to go back from where we had started, and so we decided to make camp on that little strip of land. There was a dry bag, actually, that had rolled up on the same shoreline we were at, and in that dry bag was our only dry sleeping bag. So then we just kind of settled in and got into a dry sleeping bag. I had a camp stove that had survived the fire, so we used the stove for heat to heat our bodies back up.
Greg and Julie spend the night. They are wet. They are cold. But they live to see morning. The fire at Boundary Waters burned for 16 miles and destroyed nearly 100,000 acres.
If you're in a forest, there's no safe distance to be away from a forest fire or wildfire, and that's simply because of their unpredictability.
For Greg, who's been embedded with wildfire crews as a photojournalist, the experience gave him a new respect for the violent power of fire.
Well, I learned to be more observant of any forest fire, no matter how far it is away from me. Because of our experience in the Boundary Waters over the years, it literally saved our lives. Without that experience, we most likely would have not have survived.
Fire can create its own weather systems. And weather itself plays a crucial role in the spread of wildfires. Hot days dry out trees, and dry winds propel fire. Nowhere more so than in California, where wicked winds of the west can create monster firestorms. October 1991, Oakland Hills, California. A small forest fire, driven by high winds, begins to spread. Within minutes, it's a wild inferno, devouring the forest and threatening the lives of residents.
Wildfires are really a byproduct of a weather event. It's essentially hot, tinder-dry conditions, a spark from some lightning, and then throw in some wind into the equation, and you have a wildfire.
The Oakland Hills wildfire spread so rapidly and mercilessly, it shocks everyone. Firefighters, residents, even seasoned journalists who thought they'd seen it all.
I'm a television news reporter from the San Francisco Bay Area. In over 3 decades of television reporting, I've covered earthquakes, floods, fires, but this one particular wildfire in Oakland is certainly one that I will never, ever forget.
October 20th, 1991, was meant to be one of the best days in Rob Roth's life.
Hey. Oh, thank you.
That was the due date. My wife and I were expecting our first child.
As Rob prepares for work, he's excited and anxious about the prospect of becoming a dad. He and his cameraman head out to cover a routine story, the dying stages of a minor brush fire that firefighters had all but extinguished the day before.
The weather that day in October was typical October weather in the Bay Area. It was warm, it was breezy but not overly windy. An ideal day. It was a beautiful day, actually. Nothing unusual. And in fact, it had been a relatively quiet fire season. The idea was that we would do a story that said, hey, we had this small fire yesterday, but overall, it was a pretty uneventful fire season.
Rob and his cameraman head up to the Oakland Hills, the site of yesterday's brush fire.
In and around the San Francisco and Oakland Bay Area is the combination of topography and the different air masses that influence the weather. What we've got is an area off to the east, the mountainous terrain, the Diablo Mountain chain, off to the west, the Pacific Ocean, a series of canyons and valleys that these winds flow from the Pacific down the mountain ranges. They can funnel, become stronger, down these canyons, down these valleys. And what this leads to actually is a lot of variability in the weather conditions in very short distances, what meteorologists call microclimates. So in one area, hot, dry conditions could be occurring, and yet maybe only a few miles away, much moisture and cooler conditions being influenced by the Pacific.
When we got there, there was a crew of firefighters, and they were actually wrapping up. There was no sign of any stress or pressure or anything other than this fire's out, we can clean up and go back. In fact, I did a report standing right where the fire had been. That's how safe it was to be there at that point.
Hello, I'm Rob Roth, and today we're back on the scene of a fire which began burning yesterday afternoon. Let's go have a closer look.
And then the winds kicked up. And they were swirling winds, and they were increasingly more and more powerful. All of a sudden, I noticed in the area where the firefighters had been, there was a flare-up. So what had been maybe a little brush that was still smoldering had kicked up. And as the winds kept pushing through, this flare-up got larger and larger. And I'm thinking, well, the firefighters are here. They'll know what to do. They'll be fine. They're on it. But they couldn't quite get it out, and it kept spreading, and it kept getting larger and larger. And it seemed that in a matter of just a few minutes, the whole canyon just filled up with smoke. I had never experienced the winds that I was experiencing there, in that winds generally come from one direction, but these just seemed to be swirling. They were coming from my left, from behind me, from the right. And as these winds would come, it would create more and more smoke. And so all of a sudden, our news car, which couldn't have been more than 100 feet from where we were, I couldn't see our car from the smoke.
Rob was sent to cover the story, but now he's about to become part of it. The fire is propelled by 70-mile-an-hour Diablo winds, warm gusts that blow in from deserts to the east.
These warm, dry winds come down the slopes of the Diablo mountain range right into the San Francisco Bay Area. And this is particularly dangerous because it's got a lot of dry trees, grasses that would be obvious fuel for forest fire situations. Combining that with the hot, dry winds coming down from the Diablo mountain range, the Diablo winds, these can fan the flames, cause small brush fires to become much larger wildfires.
The fiery air rises, creating a swirling updraft.
When we have winds blowing, sometimes almost up to hurricane force, 70 miles an hour, 75 miles an hour, it's almost like a flamethrower or a blowtorch on these fires. The fire can spread very, very quickly. If you're not prepared, if you haven't been watching this fire, it can become a very, very dangerous situation.
As fire grows and burns vegetation, it creates its own fuel, and in turn, creates its own wind. The very definition of a firestorm.
And if that happens,
we continued to film.
Off of that ridge, it can actually...
They were just coming from all directions, these winds. Smoke was filling the air. You could sort of feel this getting away from the firefighters. It just wouldn't go out, and it just kept getting larger and larger and spreading. You really couldn't see very far because of the smoke, but you could kind of tell that, you know, it was well beyond what the firefighters were able to handle. It was as if gasoline was being poured from the sky. As these winds would come in, you'd get these whoosh, this gust of flame that would just shoot up, and then a new fire would pick up. It was very scary. And I looked around and I realized that I could no longer see where the firefighters were. The situation at hand was getting worse by the second. We knew we were in trouble, and there was a certain amount of fear that was starting to build up. I was also thinking that this is impossible, that this could be happening on this day, because this was the due date for my wife's and our daughter to be born. I got overwhelmed with sadness for an instant, thinking that, you know, maybe my wife may have to sort of go through this by herself. There was fire to our right, there was fire to our left, and in front of us and up was the fire, and it was beating down on us. We're talking 2,000-degree heat. It was just its own monster. For a quick second, my photographer, Nick, and I looked at each other, and we thought, uh-oh, what do we do now? And at the same time, I was kind of being filled up with this sense of sadness. My daughter is supposed to be born on this day. What's my wife going to do? It was extremely dangerous and confusing. The fire at this point had its own weather system. It wasn't responding the way normal fires do.
When we talk about wildfires creating their own weather systems, what we're really talking about is a wildfire that has grown to a certain size, a certain proportion. Huge amounts of superheated air is rising up in the atmosphere. That warm air wants to rise. As that air is rising, it's being replaced at the surface by winds from other directions. Dry conditions coming in from the east, moisture conditions coming in from the Pacific. But as those winds meet at the base of the fire, a lot of turbulent mixing, a lot of vortices can set up. And so what we're literally talking about is the creation of a firestorm. A firestorm then is creating its own weather, its own wind system. So it's a very catastrophic situation when the wildfire grows to such a size that it can become a full-fledged firestorm.
The fire is now burning on 5 fronts.
It was like a monster out of control. The sound was just so loud, you had to shout over it. Areas that we had been in minutes before were now under siege by this fire. We weren't prepared for anything like this.
Rob and his cameraman struggle to breathe through the thick veil of smoke. A wall of fire separates Rob from his vehicle, making escape impossible. Just when he thinks there's no way out,
a fire truck came out of the smoke. The battalion chief said, "You guys better hop on." We got on and they just gunned it out of that area.
the fire has spiraled completely out of control.
These firefighters were not there to fight the fire, they were there to evacuate and get people out. That fire truck was the last vehicle that could get out. If that fire truck had not come when it did, I'm sure I wouldn't be sitting here right now. That whole area where we were was completely devastated. That area looked like a moonscape.
Rescued from the killer blaze, Rob and his cameraman are attended to by paramedics.
My photographer was complaining that his chest hurt, that he had perhaps breathed too much smoke, and so they took him just to give him some oxygen. But we still had this fire to deal with. I ended up feeling like I could, continue, the hope that, other people got out of this area. I was still able to breathe, luckily, so I went back to the station and began putting this story together.
The fire killed 25 people and wiped out nearly 3,500 homes. It was one of the deadliest fires in California's history. For Rob, memories of the Oakland firestorm are both painful and poignant.
At one point, the battalion chief, James Riley, had gone to help a woman who was in some distress up in the hills. They found his body next to her body, and it appears that they were struck by power lines that had come down. And he was killed on there, probably within several minutes of him telling us to get on the truck. He was gone. His funeral was 8 days later, and it was 8 days later that my daughter, Casey, was born, and I couldn't go to his funeral because of that. But I remember thinking just that I'm forever grateful that I was able to be there when she was born. And it was, thanks to Chief Riley and his crew. This fire had a very deep effect on me personally. It took something as deeply emotional as my baby being born to sort of get me out of the sadness that I'd been feeling about what had happened at this fire, and to Chief Riley.
The Oakland firestorm changed the way Rob covers wildfires, no matter how non-threatening they may appear.
A fire can change on a dime. This was way beyond anything that I had ever experienced before. This is definitely a day I will never forget.
Wind can spread fires, and fires can create their own weather. But what happens when it rains after a fire? Known for its location and climate, California has seen fire and it has seen rain. And unfortunately, when these weather events happen in this order, mudslides can occur, causing horrific damage. Daniel Dreyfus is a photojournalist who's traveled the world, capturing incredible stories.
I've seen some pretty extreme things in my career.
Over the past 12 years, he has witnessed destruction in all types of environments, from deserts and jungles to wildfires and urban centers.
My photos have been seen in publications throughout the world, including the New York Times, CNN, The Guardian, San Francisco Chronicle, the LA Times, and many more. As a photojournalist, I've traveled the world photographing devastation, but this was the weather event I'll never forget.
There's a number of different conditions that could create a landslide. In this situation, it's a combination of you have very steep slopes because it's a fault line where the land is actually rising, and then we had a severe fire that removed the vegetation, which made the hill more susceptible to a landslide.
December 4th, 2017, Santa Barbara, California. Daniel receives a call from his editor.
It was about 5 a.m. I picked up the phone. All she said was, "Ventura's on fire, go now." As a photojournalist, if you're covering a fire, you need to have the proper fire gear. So you need to have everything a firefighter has, pretty much. So I quickly grabbed my fire gear and headed down to Ventura. As I got closer to Ventura, you can see the glow from the Thomas Fire.
The Thomas Fire, as it would be later called, named after Thomas Aquinas College in Ventura County. The fire started as a small brush fire, but then accelerated into a full-on wildfire, spreading quickly through the rugged mountain terrain due to the strong Santa Ana winds.
These are very hot, dry winds that come down from the Santa Ana Mountains into the coastal parts of Southern California. Very low humidities, literally giving ideal conditions for forest fire conditions. That if forest fires develop, these Santa Ana winds can flame them up, can intensify them, make them even more powerful.
The 101's right on the coast, and it sort of turns, and you can see more Ventura, and I can see the glow from the fire a couple miles away. All of downtown Ventura had been evacuated. The fire was 2 blocks from down Main Street. There was a lot of destruction. There was a lot of houses on fire. Apartment complexes were on fire, and there was a lot of fire trucks. I look for people trying to get out. I look for firefighters fighting the fire. The smoke is a huge factor when you're out covering a fire. I mean, if you don't have goggles, you don't have a mask, it can get really difficult to breathe. There's a lot of smoke. So it's physically draining. I was covered in soot all over my face, my hands, my camera gear gets pretty beat up sometimes. There was an elderly couple.
Hey, you okay?
And they were telling me that the home was over 100 years old, and they've owned it their entire life and just passed it down to their daughter and her family. And the woman was just devastated. I mean, that's all I could do, photograph it and tell her story. Being able to tell those stories is important. Without photojournalists or videographers, there aren't fundraisers, there aren't people to help without the knowledge.
These are downslope winds. These winds can accelerate as they come down. They're warm winds, compressed as they slide down that slope. The other concern we have is an inversion in the atmosphere. A layer of warm air above the ground keeps that air sort of very stable, trapped in the lowest layers, almost ducts the air, funnels that wind down towards those lower elevations. If we've got very dry conditions with respect to the trees and the bushes and shrubs, a lot of fuel potential for the fire, all of these ingredients coming together can lead to a catastrophe.
Some houses, you know, you see the whole house gone, but you see a half a room left with pictures still on the wall. Or you find stuffed animals that have been burnt but aren't completely burnt. And you find half-burnt pictures. You know, that part is hard. You know, you see that and what people can lose in an instance from a fire. So seeing this, I mean, it was difficult. It was very difficult. But, you know, trying to separate that and focus on photos and trying to capture what's happening is important as well.
The main driver behind the Thomas fire in terms of how quickly it spread and the amount of acreage that it ended up burning up was, again, back to these Santa Ana winds. Wind speeds of 65 miles an hour, fanning these flames. What we're talking about is these winds, the capability to add air into the fire, the fuel that drives the fire, and also then driving the fire forward into unburned areas, tilting the flames towards the unburned areas, almost like a flamethrower or a blowtorch, sending embers farther downstream into where there are unburned areas, causing those areas to catch. So that, again, main factor here for how big the fire was, how damaging it was these Santa Ana winds.
Just over 1 month from when Daniel received that fateful call about the wildfire, the phone rings again.
Hey, what's up? It was about 6 a.m. when I got a call from an editor telling me to get to Montecito as fast as possible. There's been a mudslide.
The wildfire was extinguished a month ago, but it's still wreaking havoc in the California hills. The flames had destroyed plant roots that stabilized the soil, creating the perfect conditions for a mudslide.
So I jumped in the car and tried to drive to Montecito, only to encounter numerous roadblocks and people telling me that I can't drive on the 101 because it's been flooded.
In common practice, we refer to them as mudslides, but it's more than just mud. There's debris, large objects that can get transported, and so a more correct term would be landslide. What's happening in a landslide is that the soil on a hill is being mobilized and it's moving. So the land is actually moving with the water down the hill and then being deposited somewhere else.
I really had no idea what to expect. When I got to the first location, I realized how bad it was. This isn't just a mudslide. I mean, the whole mountain came down.
Geological Survey estimates that 25 to 50 Americans are killed on average each year as a result of landslides. This is more than earthquakes.
There was debris everywhere. The entire street, cars, debris, everything was under 2.5 feet, 3 feet of mud. There was people trapped in the hotel. It was surreal because the editor kept telling me to go to a retirement home that was up that street, and I kept telling him, like, I physically cannot go there. So I called the editor. I said, listen, I physically can't go there. The mud is 3 feet deep. I didn't bring any gear for this. And so our conversation was, can you go here? And I kept saying, I physically can't go there.
Daniel, like almost all of the Shock residents in the area, could not fully comprehend what had happened during the early morning hours of January 9th. While residents were sleeping, at approximately 3:30 a.m., half an inch of intense rain fell within a 5-minute period, creating a natural disaster.
That's extremely intense. In most of North America, a very rainy day would be maybe an inch of rain. So to have that amount of water concentrated in such a short period is a very extreme condition.
In addition to the rain, it was the conditions left by the previous month's wildfire that allowed water to flow without barriers.
The fire leaves behind it a thin layer of ash, and that ash is very quickly mobilized, and that then leaves the soil completely exposed. And raindrops, when they hit that bare soil, they can disturb it. It kicks it up almost like a mini bomb, and then redisperses it very smoothly, and this creates a surface crust. So that surface crust prevents water from infiltrating into the soil like it would normally. And instead, it's trapped at the surface, it accumulates, and then becomes overland flow. That small amount of sheet flow, as it moves down, gets bigger and bigger, and as it increases and concentrates, it has a lot of energy, and that allows it to pick up and displace progressively larger objects as it moves down the hill. In this case, it's not the water that causes the destruction, it's the debris and the material that comes with it.
Materials such as vegetation, cars, houses, and boulders. Daniel not only witnesses the destruction, but needs to document it.
Seeing the size of those rocks were just, I mean, rocks taller than a semi-truck were moved. There's cars that are up to almost to the windows in mud. There was tons of debris from homes, paperwork, beach chairs, anything that's in a person's home.
We don't do a good job of mapping out the high-risk areas for landslides, and more importantly, where the material is going to be deposited. Because you have two areas of risks. The land that will slide, and then where that material will be deposited. And often we have people living in areas where that material could deposit, and there you end up with the destruction. And we don't have good maps categorizing that risk. With flooding, we do it really well. We draw a line on a map around a river and say, this is the dangerous zone, that's the safe zone. We could do something quite similar with landslide mapping and hazard mapping, but we don't have the same degree of maps in Canada and in the US.
I climbed through the mud, tried to get to different areas to take different shots. My boots and my pants are 1.5 feet deep in the mud, socks soaking wet. As I was climbing through mud and trying to get better angles to get shots, my phone's going off, directing me different ways, trying to go to different areas. At one point, there was a car floating down the 101 in debris, so I tried to get there. There was a search and rescue team from Fresno, and so I went with them, searching cars, poking holes, trying to find bodies or survivors. I was so focused on trying to get photos and trying to figure out where to go that I didn't have time to think about my own safety. Hiking through the mud and seeing some of these houses, it really was surreal. To see a 2-story house that had moved 50 feet from where the foundation was is unreal. Seeing houses covered in mud up to the 2nd story and watching search and rescue teams go in is hard to watch, and it's emotionally draining. You're trying to piece it together and like how an event like this could really happen, and within an instance.
The Thomas Fire destroyed 1,063 buildings, over 281,000 acres of vegetation, and caused 2 fatalities. Its aftermath led the way for the Montecito mudslide, which leveled 65 homes and killed 21 residents.
It's surreal to see how weather can change in that short amount of time.
We need to have better mapping so that we can protect residents. I think it also speaks to the impact that climate change may have on our communities, because in many areas we are expecting to have more severe fires in the future as a result of drier winters and warmer conditions. And at the same time, we are expecting to have more intense rainfalls. And so the risks for landslides, like the one that was experienced in this case, are going to stay with us and in fact, maybe even become more likely in the future.
It was heartbreaking to know that some of these people were not in an evacuation zone, were not warned. Nobody saw the scale of this happening. And to see that in my own backyard, I mean, to see in my neighborhood, it really hits home. Separating myself from that is difficult, but I'm there to do a job and I'm there to tell their story. I tried my best to show the sheer destruction, the emotion, the loss, to tell that story, to tell that this weather-related incident is powerful, and to hopefully share with the world that this can happen to anyone.